Here, I'm Barbara Tidwell, the County Council Chair. It's good to see everyone here. Thank you for attending, and we'd especially like to thank Congressman Blake Moore for being here, and thank you for taking the time to visit with us. And we'll let him go ahead and start this with a little bit of an introduction of himself and some things that he'd like to talk about.
Absolutely. Thanks. I don't know exactly how all of our meetings get set up, but I know that we wanted to connect with the council. I've had numerous opportunities just individually to be able to meet with David Zook, and we stayed very close. I love these chances. We landed last night back from DC, and so spending a day up here. This is a great meeting. I'm really excited about it, but I literally just left the kitchen of Bluebird candy shop, so that was a little more. I like that a little bit better.
We can go back.
Yeah, we could have had the meeting there. So we met with the chamber this morning. Wool growers first thing. Doing a couple of media interviews, and I've had an opportunity since the campaign to spend plenty of time up here, and I joked with the chamber this morning. I said, hey, you all keep doing your job, keeping that unemployment among the lowest in the entire country, and then I'll tweet about it and try to take as much credit as possible. They liked it. There's something special here in Cache County. You've found a unique niche. I went to school, when I was at school here, there's something special then. What's happened over the last couple decades, while I won't age myself, I think about what it would be like to be the experience of a college student right now. There was jobs available, and there was some opportunities to work while you're going to school, but there wasn't the type of industries that you have now that really diversified this entire economy. And when you see that take place, you see real awesome positive outcomes come from that. With that comes challenges with growth and maintaining an agriculture community that has to be part of, this is the heritage and the culture of this area. And so there's absolute challenges, but being able to see you all handle the growth, address employment issues the way that you have, it's an honor to be able to represent that. I use tidbits of what so much of Utah and areas like this do well, and try to infuse that into conversations, at least with my colleagues back in Washington. And so just know that I'm really, really honored to be able to sort of share what is so good about the first district. And, we need to implement more of that at the federal level. It's a nice campaign slogan, I get that, but it is true. And the more and more best practices that we can build here, I want to be a part of infusing that in Congress, and just using these as awesome examples, and you all create that opportunity. So this is an amazing community, and I love spending as much time as I possibly can up here. So the one thing I wanted to just highlight, and for folks here to know what we're working on. And so you can use that as a way to say, okay, maybe there's something that we can do, and maybe there's something that we can collaborate with Congressman Moore's team. And I want to highlight two particular bills that we've done, because I was joking with Carl and Barbara earlier. It's becoming a lost art back in Washington, but my job is still to be a legislator. And my job is not to be famous on Twitter. My job is not to be all over the cable news channels. My job, I was elected to represent, to conduct awesome constituent service, which we've got, a really, really awesome, a great team in the district. But my job is to find opportunities that support the community. Right now, we have a problem when we have a potential calamity on our hands with the Great Salt Lake. The state legislator's hyper-focused on it. We have industry that's worried about it. We have groups, Audubon Society, and across the board, from advocacy groups to legislators to industry, people are concerned about the declining Great Salt Lake. And, Speaker Wilson, legislature, they bubbled up opportunities for us to address on my role in natural resources, and we were able to successfully pass in committee, waiting for a House floor vote, the Saline Lakes bill. And the Saline Lakes bill is, it broadens out to the entire region. And in order to, I worked with my Democrat colleagues on the committee, but they're also in California, that also have terminal lakes in their districts. We built a coalition, we got the legislation done, and now we're just waiting for it to go in the House. Senator Romney's doing something comparable on the Senate side. I just wanted to give that a quick example, because as you probably sit and watch and see all of the drama unfold about everything related to Congress, there is still productive work going on, and I'm trying my hardest to kind of cut through all the noise and still do my job, because I do view my job as doing that. And it's a really neat thing to be able to put forward a legislative initiative that will, directly benefit. It will only be a piece of the pie. The real work is going to be done here to, address that and find out what solutions we need to. The governor's office is also, obviously I should have mentioned that, very hyper-focused on it. We were able to lean in and do our part. The Bear River Heritage Study Act that was the Council of Government up here in this region with Box Elder and Southern Idaho. It's been in the works for a while, and we were able to successfully get it through committee this time. Also waiting on a House floor vote, hopefully that we can get that done through this 117th Congress. That will create new opportunities for tourism, for highlighting the cultural heritage of this area. We're working on things with respect to the Golden Spike. We're working on, the Bear River Massacre, the work that, that Darren Perry, who I ran against in the general. I hope people recognize that we tried to have as positive of discourse as possible, because we've got to move our communities forward. And so that's another really cool piece of legislation that I point back to. And as people say, well, what have you loved about this and everything? And I'm like, well, we have actually been able to get stuff done amidst a really crazy political climate. And that's what I want to highlight to you all, because as I look back at each of the communities within my district, or just Utah in general, we're a small enough state that, there's collaboration among everybody. Like, what you do in our counties and cities is noteworthy, and I just want you to know that I very much appreciate the good example that you all set, that as you continue to do your job, just know that we're available, and however we can be helpful to advance some of your initiatives. So that's not a very raucous political speech that I just gave, but that's the kind of stuff that I would want to be able to share with everybody. So I am available. I want to just jump in if there's any questions. There's obviously lots to discuss, but and I'll highlight that I have two members of my team here. They're right there. Okay, so Peter is our district director, and Ben is a former intern out in the DC office, finishing up the University at Utah State, and just came on with our district office. So didn't scare him away from an internship in DC. We tried to work him hard, but he still wanted more. So constituent service, anything you need help with navigating federal agencies, we're getting a lot. We're getting calls from across the board. Passports are way delayed. IRS is tough. As you hear any particular complaints about delays and returns and things like that, just remember, come to us. We'll be able to help. I'm pleased, but also a little shocked that sometimes if our office makes a call, things can move a little more quickly. I think there's good and bad to that. There should be a better process. Our federal agencies need to ramp up their technology capability, their customer service to be able to do things more quickly, and we want to help them do that. But just again, I say that as I also like to remind. I do it at each town hall. Remember, Social Security, Medicare, those types of questions. That's part of our job as well. So please feel free to always connect with us on that. So I'm going to pause there and just tell you thanks for doing such an amazing job, being an awesome district to represent, and look forward to continuing on. So any particular questions, and I will defer to you on the rest and kind of how to run the rest of this. So.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Council, start with questions. Dave?
IRS has already promised delays already, haven't they?
Yeah.
I thought they did.
Get out ahead of it and say it's early. Yeah, there's a they actually need updated in their phone system to be able to. You can actually, if you're on hold long enough, it will just close out, and you have to start back over again. So there really does need to be advances in like the technology, and they've got to come up with some fixes. And there is at least work kind of trying to address that a little bit. So.
But I do have one question in the balance of, like you mentioned about the Great Salt Lake. And this might be an example when their needs are great and you find these fix-its and they start going to somewhere else to fix that problem, that can actually hurt a lot of other people in the process. Because it's going to take water to fix the Great Salt Lake. And when they go upstream, we are upstream. So their fix-its, it's hard to say, are they more valuable than other people's ownership of that water?
Exactly. Our portion of this will be a study that is going to be able to identify, you can look at other saline lakes that have lost or that have receded and kind of gone away, and the respiratory disease that comes with it, the dust and all that kind of stuff. So this will be an evaluation of what that is and hopefully inform decision making. But from what I can tell, those interests are highly represented, and like the legislators from Box Elder have a strong voice in this, and particularly as they're along a lot of that ag line from the Bear River coming down. Overall, we're having drought issues. And that's just bad for everybody. Where are the areas to mitigate first? You see some areas, some city councils really pushing hard and not now mandating anything, but encouraging less water use. Front yards maybe front yards don't need to be what they have been in the past. Those kind of things we've got to do that stuff first before real communities get hurt. So, yeah. Yeah. I know you have good representation in the state legislature from here too, as I interact with all of them that are focused on making sure that those interests are met. And it's that's one of the realities too, is as population continues to grow just along the Wasatch Front, our communities outside the Wasatch Front. I don't look at Logan rural anymore. There's other rural communities. I don't look at this. It doesn't have that same exact feel, but being outside the Wasatch Front, the population growth there will give less representation around, and so we need to be mindful of that. And I hope that as I look at my district as a whole, I can mitigate that to wherever I possibly can. I won't be making a lot of those particular decisions. We were able to put a bill together that can help the geological survey and study be done on that. All the efforts will be taking place more, at the state level. But hopefully I can sort of, be a broader voice of, Logan is just as important as Layton, right? And that's how you kind of go across, because, I dealt with it probably more in Vernal, because Vernal was not seeing the growth that here was as part of the district. Their voice becomes smaller and smaller just because they're going to have fewer representatives because their population's growing, so it's tough. We can't just, and if you look at big picture and trying to be positive about whatever takes place with COVID, where I always saw there was an opportunity for people not to have to move to the Wasatch Front if we could do a more remote workforce. Could you live out in the Uinta Basin and still maybe work for a financial services firm that's in Salt Lake and conduct your work more remotely? Like that type of stuff can keep kids, families, and not be forced to leave our rural communities. So,
Representative Moore, my question really is, now that you've been in Washington, you've associated with policymakers and people who can make a difference, but I just always come away with a sense that nobody really understands the debt issue that our nation is in, and nobody really cares. And so my question is, you know, why they don't care? Am I missing something? Is there something that we as the general populace don't understand about how much $1 trillion is? Paul gave us some numbers on Tuesday night that are just mind-boggling when you realize that 778 years before Christ to now, at $1 million a day, finally gets to $1 trillion. And we have 30 times that in debt, and yet nobody seems to really care in Washington. Instead, it's just keep throwing the money out there. And so my question is it that they don't know? Do they not think that there are any kind of repercussions for actions like that? As Dave pointed out, that we focus on trying to help the Great Salt Lake, but what are the repercussions of doing something like that on every other aspect? And I just think of that debt situation and think, gee, yeah, nice having all this CARES money thrown at you, but it's funny money. There's nothing behind it. And
Well, everybody, Councilman Ward asked about the debt, so settle in, because here we go. So I just had a breakfast meeting yesterday with a group called 30 for 30, and I don't know why they named it after the ESPN. The best video, the ESPN does awesome videos called 30 for 30. I don't know why it's the same name. It's 30 Republicans and 30 Democrats. So on one hand, you can be excited that there's a bipartisan group that's solely focused on the budget and solely focused on creating a way to reverse our debt culture. On the other hand, you can be terrified that it's only 60 people of 435. So it's a mixture. What's happening right now, there are some people and that will say, all right, we've shown over the last 20 years, we went from $14 trillion and we completely doubled that. We're at 30 trillion now. Where's our country? Are we okay? Like we're still creating good jobs. We've still got a strong economy for the most part. Maybe modern monetary theory is a thing, and that'll latch on to some people. And it's scary that even some people could recognize that some sense of fiscal responsibility is good. You can trace it back to two more things that I'll mention. The easy money policies that the Fed has been able to create, you can almost directly correlate a rapid increase in debt to those policies. We had an individual, it's top of mind because the individual that was presenting to us was a member of that, and he kind of highlighted that. He recommended a book, and I jumped on and grabbed it. The other thing that you'll see, and this is something that I have as the newcomer to Washington, that I felt like I could go back and really challenge the notion that that place is so hyper partisan. Partisanship has a lot of negative externalities. Partisanship will create some gridlock that maybe keeps Congress from doing more, and sometimes that's better. But the real negative from hyper-partisanship in Washington right now is that as we've seen it grow over the last 10 years, our debt to GDP ratio has grown with that. And the more that you have members of Congress retreat to their corners for whatever reasons that they want to do it, they're scared about their primary election, they're worried about being perceived as soft or not conservative or not progressive enough. Like that's a real thing, and they go through that. The more we retreat to our corners, the more our debt will continue to climb. The last time we balanced the budget was 1997, when we had a Democrat administration with a very centrist, sound individual over the budget committee within the administration named Leon Panetta. And then when you had Newt Gingrich and John Kasich heavily working on this in the House of Representatives, and you had a Republican-led Congress. So you had balance in Washington, which we don't have right now. And when you do that, you almost forced each other to work together, and they were able to do it. That's because there was leadership that cared about it 22 years ago. I remember watching the 2016 Republican debates. That same individual, John Kasich, that's all he would always highlight that in the debates. And then as soon as he lost, it never once came up. You can go back and watch the, I wouldn't recommend it because it was horrible, but watching the Clinton versus Trump debates in 2016, no one's talking about it. At the leadership level, at the presidential letter, it's just not something people talked about. So there's a lack of leadership motivation to be able to do it. And that's what this group of 30 for 30 is trying to do. So we have a letter that we've all coalesced around, Republicans and Democrats, and asked for these specific things to change. We should remove the debt ceiling as, all the debt ceiling is. Big news here, everybody. The debt ceiling is an opportunity for leadership, who's ever in control, to sort of corral their team to get together behind some particular initiative. And hey, we have to vote for the debt ceiling, but what do you need in favor to do that? Republicans will usually come around to finally voting in favor of the debt ceiling if they get certain reforms done or promises for spending cuts. And Democrats will vote for the debt ceiling if they have some of their agenda items met. And the debt ceiling is used as a bargaining chip more than anything, and it's harming every single one of us, and it's harming our kids. It's giving the future a much less hope for the future. So, what I'm trying to do, joining every single one of those bipartisan groups, and hopefully we can grow and inform and push our leadership to make this a top priority. Kevin McCarthy, in numerous times, has told all of us, his two biggest concerns and the two biggest things that we need to be focused on are debt and China. And we'll just have to put our money, we'll have to remove, money where our mouth is, but maybe less money, less spending where our mouth is when he has an opportunity, if we win the majority, if the Republicans win the majority in this year, we will see, are we able to get us onto that path? So what I am doing in my own individual sphere is I've put together a group of about 10 individuals mostly from the 1st District, an economist, government affairs person with the governor's office who's legislative affairs, and home builder, a couple healthcare professionals, a manufacturing CEO, some financial services folks, an accountant. And our first step is in the next couple months, put out a document that highlights every major budget line item, from healthcare to Social Security to defense, to what is the ideal state that can get us to, lower our debt to GDP ratio, get us on the right track again, and what are the near-term recommendations. And then it will be my job as a lowly freshman in the minority to just start communicating that and taking these options, see what we can actually get changed in the reform process. The mandatory spending versus discretionary spending is completely flipped right now. When it used to be, there was more discretionary spending as a percentage of the total budget, and now that's completely flipped. And the problem with that is Congress doesn't even really address the mandatory spending each year. They just get put on autopilot, and we don't change that unless you reform how that process is done. And if we can't flip that around, our mandatory spending continues to grow at a much higher percentage. And I'll be very clear, no party has the moral authority on this anymore. We have seen it kind of just go away from potential leadership. Republicans will always try to reduce taxes and reduce spending. Democrats will always try to increase taxes and increase spending, right? And if you successfully do both, you don't have as big a deficit problems. But politically, it's always too hard for Republicans to reduce spending. It's politically always too hard for Democrats to increase taxes. So what are you left with? More debt, more deficits each year, and then the debt continues to grow. So that's what's going on. I am very hopeful, and I have communicated this to leadership, that we have an opportunity to at least make a dent and show the American people that Congress also doesn't want our currency reserve status gone. We do not want China to take over, or we don't want the digital markets and the Bitcoins and the things like that for people to have to rely on too much. We want to be the strength of the future, and we have to reverse this trend to give confidence back in our markets. So if as Biden will be in the White House, and if Republicans take control of Congress in 2022, I will continue to communicate it and be committed to it. We'll see what I can accomplish, but I at least will have actual pen to paper on what the ultimate plan could look like.
The question is, why isn't every member of Congress concerned about it?
The reason why so there will be more Republicans on that committee, but we're trying to keep it wholly bipartisan, so we're just kind of trying to keep it even. So the 30 for 30, that's why it's staying there. Democrats will say, well, Trump added a whole bunch to the debt, and he did. Tax, again, they weren't able to reform any of the entitlements like it's funny, President Trump wasn't able to reform entitlements like President Clinton was, right? Like the last president that actually reformed welfare and addressed some of that mandatory spending was a Democrat with Congress as Republicans. I think hopefully we can mimic a little bit of that in the 118th Congress. And there is a strong motivation. But I also see too many people just constantly saying it and talking about it being a problem, and then nobody really knowing how to fix this. Nobody really knowing how to address mandatory spending and what it's grown to. And we've got to be able to address it. And I think it's going to be little things too. Like there's going to be little. We're supportive of something. So right now you graduate grad school and you go work for your company, and you have student debt. Well, you can choose between paying down your student debt or investing in your 401k, right? Those are tough choices, right? They're both, you're turning down free money because your company's willing to match up to 3 to 5%. But on the other side, you're churning interest, so I got to pay down that debt. Why not create a system that encourages employers, if you show that you're paying down your student debt, we will still match you. Now, you're not going to be contributing to your 401k, but we will still match you. Why not build 401k and retirement investment way earlier in people's careers so we don't have such a strain with Social Security? So little changes like that. It won't affect anybody 50, 55 years older that have paid into the system, but what can we do to change and change that for the future, a better outlook? So I ran on 3 things. I want to be a strong conservative voice and be a good influence on the next generation of Americans. Be an advocate for Hill Air Force Base. It's a very specific, advocacy group that powers a lot of our northern Utah economy, and it's really important. And it's a very specific and also, how would you say, practical thing. And then the third thing I would always talk about was being a part of the reversal of debt culture. And it's a tall order. Our interest that we owe now is much worse than it ever was back in the late 90s. So that burden itself makes a balanced budget extremely difficult. But we'll never get there if we don't even at least try to reverse it. So
I'm going to build on, I have 2 questions. When you talk about paying off student debt or wiping it off, to me, we're missing another part of our culture, those who didn't go to school and who become
100%.
laborers and everything else. Why aren't we rewarding them and saying if you start an entrepreneur or a business, that they're not in so much debt or even into the agricultural side? So we seem to focus on, if you went to school and you got debt, you poor person. We're not focusing on those who become laborers and contractors and construction and workers and stuff like that. Where's the incentive on them to engage and go to business if we're just focusing on student debt? And I understand education is important, but I believe a career and education or a vocation are important from that standpoint. Second point is, I got my voice going, lawlessness in the nation. I mean, I watched this morning where drugstores are having to put bars on toothpaste and lotion and everything else. We're killing our police force by scrutinizing everything they do, but yet we're just letting everything go rampant, and I think that's going to be a demise of GDP and the society as well.
Love it. Because I 100% agree with you across the board. I won't belabor the point, but we need to do more, again, what Utah has done with our tech centers. Davis Tech, Ogden Weber, Bridgerland, UB Tech. When I was in high school, it was kind of like, oh, you're going into the vocational thing. Oh, you're going to be a mechanic. There was a stigma there. We've reversed that. Now, it's not perfect, but we've done a lot to reverse that. These are high-tech centers, and you're seeing juniors and seniors in high school that are going and engaging in these tech centers while they're still finishing up their high school to go gain a skill, to become an EMT, become a welder. And then if they want to use that skill to also help them get through the rest of their college to ease their burden debt, if they want to go get a 4-year degree, great. but they've got a skill and they're ready to go, and there's an enormous amount of need out there for them right now. So Utah, I would carve out, say we've really incentivized it well. And I would look at giving free tuition to a high school senior to go and help with that is fundamentally different, because that's what takes place in Utah, that those are available. It's fundamentally different than for someone to have chosen, this is my path, I'm going to go, and I've decided to go get this kind of student debt, and then all of a sudden just have it waived off. That's fundamentally, completely inequitable even, right? Unfair to the entire portion. I remember someone was joking, and they're like, yeah, go be a plumber and then actually own your own home. And like, it was, I can't remember what setting it was in, but that one sticks out in my head to stigma. I think we're doing a good job. I think our workforce and our community colleges are really hitting this hard. But what you're also seeing is companies and industry work backwards. Hey, build this certification because we're short on this. You see Hill Air Force Base going to Weber State and saying, hey, we need this type of software engineer. And so it's almost like working backwards, and you're seeing that be much more productive. I think we're going to see in the next couple months the student debt sort of forbearance time frame. There's been a pause on it. What is President Biden going to do with that? And I don't think he has the support even among his Democrats to really see the student debt just become waived. So I'm hopeful that if it hasn't happened yet, like that is just that'll be catastrophic, and it just incentivizes the wrong behavior. So 100% agree, and I'll keep we will do our part to keep people posted on what we think ultimately is going to happen there. If we demonize police, fewer people will want to do that job. Fewer people do that job, crime increases. It's as simple as that. There's some stuff in the legislature that's tough right now. Matt Gwynn, Representative Matt Gwynn from the Roy area, he's working on a few things to hopefully incentivize and provide the right dignity that our police officers deserve. But it comes with all of us doing a little bit on our own. Every time my kids see a police officer, they're a little more shy than I want them to be. I'm working on it, right? Their dad's not that way, their mom's not that way. What do we do? I'm a little worried that the pandemic has made it so they're not interacting as much. But every time they see a police officer, their job is to walk up and say thank you for your service. And I've seen them actually do it, and it kind of brings a little spark to a little pep to their step. What can we do as a community to continue to make sure that we don't see what's happening across the country? But we can't disincentivize them. Every single industry I've ever worked with, I was a consultant before this, and we worked across industry, from trash collection to molecular diagnostics to financial services. Every single professional I've ever met in my entire adult life has always been willing to improve. There's no different with our police force and our law enforcement. They are willing to look at data. They are willing to embrace new technology and find ways to improve and do their job. And that's all I've seen from it, as I've done 2 or 3 actual roundtables with leadership within public safety and individual district sheriff, Arbonne, and across the board. That's the sentiment that I hear. We'll absolutely embrace whatever we can do to improve how we do our job, but constantly demonizing them has already seen a bad impact. And I hope that the American people are seeing that and noticing that, and then they'll take that to the ballot box as well.
Thank you.
I guess I did sort of give you a longer response, but those are good questions. Hello, sir.
Moore.
It's good to have you back.
Yeah, sorry I was a little late.
Absolutely
getting back
not, no
up
worries.
From the Capitol, but thank you so much for coming to visit us here, and thanks for your service. I really appreciate your priorities that you're working on. I'd like to just ask you a little bit more about, you mentioned Kevin McCarthy and his top 2 priorities of debt and China. I want to ask you specifically about China. The last time I was in D.C. and met with our delegation, it was a common topic and something it seems like everybody's concerned about. The last couple of years with COVID, I think have helped us to recognize many weaknesses in our economy and our public policy, our foreign policy in relation to China. We have so many issues related to intellectual property, defense, trade, the Belt and Road Initiative that they're pushing worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, what is Congress doing? What should we be doing to focus more on what I think is a great danger facing our world right
Yeah, we need alternatives to the economic integration that we have with China. So if you look at the Cold War, we could be really tough on Russia, right? And we had a intelligence battle with them. We had a military standoff with them that didn't ultimately come to actual conflict to a large degree. But we had all those things, and we could be firm and stand strong against Russia during that Cold War. You're seeing the same type of global superpower challenge right now. But our economic integration, our manufacturing, and everything that we're intertwined with that nation far more than we were with Russia. I mean, there was very little. We didn't have any manufacturing going on in Russia that we couldn't just like one day just be like, nope, this is our red line. We're done. The diplomatic process has ended, and we're going to go. We will use our military strength we have to have that on the table. With China, it's a whole different paradigm. So we need to be able to find other manufacturing opportunities that we don't have to rely so much on them. And the reason that there's debt in China are the two big things. Those are also intertwined. The more we grow, the more our debt grows, the less we can deter them, and we can't. They can come in and they can subsidize an industry where we are not in the position to be able to do that. Nations with high sovereign wealth funds, can have a little bit of an advantage, not much of a player and they're a good ally, but Norway, they have the capability they have an enormous amount of wealth in their country that, they're not strapped with so much debt like we are. So it's those kind of things that we can target. Encouraging more, onshore manufacturing. We've worked closely with TTM Technologies. That's a company up here. I mean, it's another example of what you have here in Logan. I mean, this is a high-tech, high-paying, amazing company that provides critical national security type of work all across this valley. We need to make sure that we can incentivize the work that they're doing because we can't rely on Chinese technology for things. Go look at what we did to deter Huawei from becoming ubiquitous, at least in not only here, but elsewhere, and with some of even in Europe and everything. Huawei's their version of Verizon, right? And they'll also make a lot of technology. And we're able to work with our allies and our international partners to not let that become take over and become so strong. There's an enormous amount of intelligence capability that they use with companies like that, and they will continue to steal intellectual property. In addition to finding other economic opportunities, is building a stronger international coalition against China. And I'm not seeing what I would hopefully like to see with COVID. I thought COVID was going to be an opportunity to really try to hold them accountable. You're just not necessarily seeing that right now, and it's concerning. One other point I wanted to make, but it just slipped my mind. If you want to simplify, because it's so complex, we just can't rely on them so much. And there are other places. We should be doing more manufacturing in Puerto Rico. It's a U.S. territory. We should strengthen that particular kind. It takes a little pain to change some of this, but we've got to be able to do it because we're seeing China become more and more emboldened. And the second that they want to really flare things up, they'll make a little move on Taiwan, forcing us to respond. And then I think that's much more catastrophic than even what we're seeing right now with Ukraine and Russia. I'm going to remain hopeful that we can offer enough potential sanctions that we need to be as strong as possible. I think Putin will look at the Biden administration similarly as the Obama administration, where he basically just walked into Crimea. And hopefully we're able to provide more of a deterrent. And I hope and I encourage President Biden. I'm not looking for messaging opportunities. Afghanistan was as tragic as it was a complete failure. I'm not looking for messaging opportunities for the Biden administration to fail. I'm really not. We're all on this ship together. I want to see us succeed. Hopefully we can show that with Russia. We saw a raid on ISIS That's unfortunately the only way to deal with ISIS, is to be strong and make sure that they don't continue to create the havoc that they're doing. And I was complimentary of the Biden administration on that. We all cheered him on. Like, we all cheered. We were in a briefing. Our ranking member over foreign affairs, Blinken, Austin, Milley, Haynes, and Mayorkas. They were all there, and he literally said to all of them, "I want to congratulate you I want to congratulate President Biden. I want to congratulate you on the successful raid." The whole place cheered. Like, there is some of that still in Washington. So,
Thank you.
it's a complex issue, particularly though military strength. That's where I'm involved. We need to not always be focusing on the last 20 years, and we need to be thinking about cyber. We need to be thinking about artificial intelligence and how to use our investment. We need to divest from areas that we're not going to need militarily anymore and go big on areas that we know China is focused, from hypersonic missiles and things like, AI, drone, nuclear deterrence, things like that. So that's something that it's like, I didn't even talk about that because it's just like almost an everyday thing for us. The big geopolitical stuff is really where my concerns are. I think we can move away and make sure we're militarily ready to take on any particular threat.
Thank you.
So,
You alluded to it earlier when you talked about not going to Congress to be on Twitter. One of the things I appreciate.
we do tweet, we do try to update folks, but it's not where I'm trying to make my name.
Yeah, you didn't go there to try to become a celebrity.
Yeah.
You went there to do the job of a congressman. And we have the best form of government in human history.
We do.
Provided for the most good in humanity ever. Could you elaborate on what it means to be a congressman, what the role of the legislature is, what the role of the executive branch is? There's so much gridlock going on, probably because people don't understand what their jobs are in a lot of ways. So
People
could you
don't
elaborate on this?
People don't understand the separation of powers. And it's really, that's something that concerns me, and something that we need to hold sacred. And that recognizing that there's three co-equal branches. You are seeing the Supreme Court step in and limit what the executive branch can ultimately do. You won't see changes. You will continually see executive level overreach and executive orders if you don't change it when you're in the majority. So even if I like the policy, we have got to the executive branch almost has to force Congress to work together. And what I mean by that is, even if it's a Republican in office and I like that particular policy, we still have to be critical of the executive branch making so many rules by fiat, making unilateral decisions that Congress should be dealing with. And Congress needs to quit getting out of their own way. We need to quit worrying about, oh no, how is this going to be perceived by some media source? And if you look at me in my first year, I've taken it from all sides. And if that's my demise, then I'll be able to tell my kids that I know I did the right thing, that I didn't just pander to a particular media source or worry about someone calling me a rhino or something stupid like that, right? Wow, what just happened? Anyway, Congress needs to recognize that we have got to, we've got to work together, and we've got to be, on my side, we've got to be the Bob Doles. And what I mean by that is Bob Dole was as strongly conservative as you could ever become, but that guy could collaborate and work together. And what do we have from it? We have hospice. He worked and got hospice put in place. What does hospice do? Hospice increases care, the quality of care, and it lowers costs, right? It's a good process. And Bob Dole is somebody that, as he passed away recently, we celebrate. We celebrate that about him. And I'm trying to take that process. I'm nowhere near where that is. I would have to prove myself over time. But I'm trying to take that approach of, you can look at my record and it's strongly conservative, but it's very collaborative. And I will find ways to work together. You saw a glimpse of it in the eviction moratorium. I hate that name because there actually is assistance for people that were going to be displaced. But the eviction moratorium needs to go away. It needed to go away. It was put in place during the Trump administration. as a stopgap. It continued on in the Biden administration. I wasn't critical until the Supreme Court ruled on it, and at that point, that's when it needed to change. The Supreme Court ruled on it, said it wasn't legitimate. There was enough of brave Democrats that just left Washington, D.C., because Pelosi was trying to get the vote to come up to extend it again. And enough of my brave Democrat colleagues, I won't call them out by name and hurt them at all politically, but they saw them, they just left town. And they're like, we're not going to vote on that, and I'm not setting up any potential proxy vote. I'm leaving. That's my answer. And then it expired within 48 hours because 2 people went to the House steps and protested that Biden felt the pressure, and he reenacted it through executive action for 2 more months. The Supreme Court stepped back in and got it back into, to where it needed to be. That can't happen. That's just those types of examples. We've got to get to that point. But it's give and take, because in order for the executive branch to relinquish some of that power, Congress has to take on the responsibility sometimes to do the hard thing. We've got to find out an immigration solution, and it's going to be threefold. It will be securing the border, but it's policy that doesn't encourage illegal activity at the border, but then it is also immigration reform, and we've got to find a way to bring in legal immigration and deal with what we have created over the last couple of decades. And there's good proposals out there. What leadership will be able to get that going? So it's I just keep coming back to separation of powers.
Well, thank you very much for that, and I just want to thank you for running for a position as congressman, knowing what that is, and trying to do the job and not be something it's not. So thank you. That's
Thanks.
your question.
Appreciate it.
I have a question. We're talking about the big debt. And to me, it just is so hard to put my head around that many dollars. You talk about if we've got to reverse that trend, but where can we, on a local level, here in our own little county, what can we do to contribute to reverse that trend? I know, we can vote for people that are going to go in there and work for us, but what else can we do on our local level to reverse that?
Yeah, other than having already provided the example on how to do it, you're not going to always have a balanced budget at the federal level. We've seen over the course of our history, we've needed to be able to invest in infrastructure. We've needed to be able to invest for wars that arise. I don't see anybody legitimately talking about a balanced budget amendment. I'd kind of like it. Maybe we say, for the next 10 years, let's do a balanced budget amendment because, we just have to do this, and maybe force that type of thing. So you're showing a good example. I would say making sure that you support candidates that are willing to be serious about this. And don't be bought into supporting an appropriations bill. Just by voting no back there doesn't mean you're actually building collaboration. So serious members that are trying to do this, I'm really frustrated at the continuing resolution process. And the last 2 times I voted no against it because I'm like, no, there's been enough time. We need an actual budget. But I would be ultimately supportive of an appropriations so I can build a camaraderie with my colleagues so we can actually come together and work together and show okay, I'm giving a little, you're giving a little. Let's get this under. So supporting those type of candidates, we have to the level of ARPA. That's the big thing, American Rescue Plan. This communities across the state will get funding from it, and it would be great if we all just said, nope, we don't want it, we're not going to accept it. We would rather you tax us less, and we would maybe increase. Personally, I'd rather see us flip. I'd rather see us be able to, you can do more effectively. You can fix your canal systems here better if you were to be able to. Citizens were paying less in federal tax, and then you would be more appropriate to maybe contribute more to our local communities, right? That trend, I don't know how to do that right now. But that would be the ideal state, was to get those back down. That is going to have to limit the size of government. We're going to have to address regulation that gets way too far. It creates way too much expense, and just continue to be a strong economy here where you're doing the sensible, smart thing. Because with federalism, we do have some protection against We still do. We have our state. We have our ability to, our ability to sort of, address our own economic issues and address our own social issues that we need to help with. And, we can still do a good job there. And give me a chance. I don't know. As I've read biographies of members of Congress, they said, look, it took me a while, but I just kept chipping away at it, and we made some success. And I think Senator Lee also says something. It's like it may just be, at some point we're going to be forced to do it. I don't want to get to that point because then that's even worse. So.
Very good. Thank you, and thank you.
I wish
for
I had a
all
better
the-
answer for that because it's our problem, and you all are showing the example on how to do it.
Okay.
Is there any discussion or talk anywhere about changing the tax code, changing how these things work? Yeah, I've told this story before, but I spent 40 years as a banker analyzing people's financial statements. And because of the number of loopholes and ways to manage how much tax you pay, I've seen billionaires pay zero because nothing illegal.
Yeah.
Just because of the tax code and the way it's set up. And yet, somebody who's a wage earner, whose total income is W-2s, they're paying the bulk of the tax. Steve Forbes, when he ran for president, he came up with a plan that was a wonderful plan, a simple, flat tax.
Yeah.
Every business is a corporation. You pay, I think he said 17% on every dollar you make above the a minimum threshold for people who are low income. And his analysis showed tax revenues to the government just skyrocketing because you did away with all of the loopholes that people can use to reduce their tax bill. And have you heard anybody address this whatsoever?
Everything that I've experienced so far has been, right when I came into Congress, that was when the Senate flipped to the Democrat, to Chuck Schumer being the majority leader. And everything has been about an increase in corporate taxes, a doubling of the capital gains, and all of those potential proposals. And as they worked their policy over the course of the last year, a lot of that went away, and they recognized that wouldn't, I don't know why they ultimately chose it, probably for political reasons, probably because they recognized that it, might really slow the economic growth. So that's the only real tax implications that we've seen. So I've only experienced the minority for 12 months. In 2017, you saw the Trump Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which it undeniably grew the economy. It also created deficits, right? And so this is a difficult thing on what's next. If you keep competition good, and we have to be competitive globally because we're in a more globalized world than we ever have been. If we keep our taxes globally competitive, we will see investment back into our country. That's a good thing. That will grow wages. That will actually grow revenue too. I don't believe it will grow enough revenue to take over a $30 trillion debt or even just the interest on what we're currently paying with our debt.
I'll interrupt you here. That's not the crux of the issue. The crux of the issue is
Loopholes.
Yeah. And Congress using taxation to modify behavior, to incent in one area and disincent in another area, and using taxation to do that, rather than using taxation simply as a means of funding the needs that we have collectively as a nation or services that have to be provided on a federal level. And so really it's a simple crux. You just do away with the tax code and implement a flat tax.
Yeah.
You never need a CPA again because you don't have to deal with all this other stuff. It's just a flat tax.
My office is already getting calls from the CPA lobbyists. So Yes, and what I'm answering is, I have not seen any effort to do that. Any pragmatic person would look at it and say, do a flat tax, or you could do a slightly regressive if you, even like, I lived in Singapore for a while, and they have a very, very simplified tax code. You don't have any real write-offs, you don't have any of those types of things that incentivize certain areas. And, based on your income, you pay X percent, and it goes up, but it never goes above like 17%. Right, so it is an awesome tax code. It's a new country. They haven't been around as long as we have. The fact that we have such history and it's moving forward, it would be miraculous to be able to do that. I haven't seen any proposals for I've heard people talk about wanting to get rid of income tax altogether, but there isn't any. There isn't any move away from what took place in 2017. That tax reform bill, that Democrat leadership this year didn't really change much of that, and the Build Back Better plan will ultimately won't pass unless there's portions of it that may go through. We're still waiting to see how that plays out. But I haven't seen that effort. But I agree with you, the pragmatic mind would love that. I'm telling you the reality, I haven't seen any legitimate proposals to continue that on. And therein lies might be one of the biggest problems. So I do fundamentally believe, though, if you keep your tax rates competitive, you can actually grow your revenue. We're at a point now, it's going to be very difficult to overtake what we've created over the last few decades.
Well, the 2017 increased my taxes. I paid more after that than I did before.
Yeah. Ways and Means Committee is the one that deals with all that. And it's salt, some states love salt, some states don't care about salt. The tax deduction that you can get if you're a higher tax states love it because you can write off more against your federal government. It's very complex, and the more complex it becomes, I don't see us necessarily solving the problem. So, okay, note to self, draw up flat tax legislation. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yes, do it.
All right. Congressman Moore, we really appreciate your time. Looks like you're getting ready to head someplace else. Is
We're
that
going to the
correct?
Veterans Center next, I believe. So,
Okay.
yeah.
But thank you so much. Does anybody have any final comments?
Thank you. We
Thank you. for
Thank
what you're
you.
doing.
Thank
We do
you
appreciate
for that. And
Eat some ice cream on the wheel.
Yep. Like I said, I ate breakfast at Herm's, so I think I'm good till tomorrow's breakfast. Forget how big the omelets are.
Wish you ice cream, come on.
Yep. So, thank you all. I appreciate it. Thanks for
thank you very
coming.
much. Yeah.